Like I said, it's been 6 years. I mean, in my first couple of years, it's like I was completely uneducated and unaware of what was going on until God blessed me to start picking up Texas law books, and I started reading and I started matching law for law. I started looking at criminal law, family law, and U.S. law, and that's how it came. That's how I became educated in the concept of what was really occurring.
I am Cynthia Becker. I am the host of the reality series, CPS The Horror Stories. I'm not an attorney or a social worker, but I am a mother of two children whose children were kidnapped by Child Protective Services. And after fighting for 2 years, I did get my children back. And now I have this platform to have other parents and family members. And now a spinoff, we're doing experts and attorneys and advocates to come on and share their experience in dealing with Child Protective Services. Vince, would you like to introduce yourself next?
Sure. My name is Attorney Vince Davis. I'm licensed here in the state of California. I am the host of The Secret, How to Fight Child Protective Services and Win. It's a radio show that's on every Saturday on 790 AM KABC in Los Angeles. It's also broadcasts live streamed every Saturday at the same time on KABC.com. So if you don't live in the Los Angeles area, or if you do live in the Los Angeles area, you can listen to the show live on KABC.com. The show is usually 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. on Saturday evenings. We do occasionally get bumped by USC sports, either football or basketball, and we're being bumped this weekend. So instead of the show being on Saturday from 7 to 9 p.m., it's going to be at Sunday. What is it, 4 to 6, Cynthia?
Yeah, 4 to 6.
4 to 6. Cynthia is my co-host on that show, and we take calls from all over the country, and we listen to stories, and we listen to questions, and we try to answer them. Over the past few months, the number of calls has increased drastically from all over the country, and now the station is getting complaints that we don't, people call in and we can't get to them. So if you're going to listen to the show or want to call into the show, make sure you call in early. So if the show's at 4 o'clock, start calling in about 10 minutes to 4. The call screener, I think, starts right around that time. So he can put you in the queue where we can take your call, and answer your questions and listen to your story.
And to update also, we started last week, Vince, with a special guest, and from this point forward, most likely we'll be having special guests every week as well. So we do have a special guest joining us this Saturday or this Sunday also.
Who is the special guest?
So it's going to be another CPS defense expert, Dean Tong, who's been in the field for over 25 years.
Yeah, I know I haven't used Dean in a case of mine, but I will be. But I do know an attorney here in the LA area who's used Dean on cases before.
So, Ms. Smith, would you like to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. My name is Lachelle Smith. I'm from Abilene, Texas. I'm a mother of 6. I have to give all the credit to God because I wouldn't be where I am with my children's case, nor would I had learned what I learned if it weren't for God in these 6 years. And I have experiences of my own that I've faced. And it's a lot of families here in Abilene, Texas that can speak for the same thing and what occurs.
Wow. So, go ahead and tell me why and how you became an expert in this field.
Like I said, it's been 6 years. I mean, in my first couple of years, it's like I was completely uneducated and unaware of what was going on until God blessed me to start picking up Texas law books, and I started reading and I started matching law for law. I started looking at criminal law, family law, and U.S. law, and that's how I became educated in the concept of what was really occurring.
So, did you happen to have a case of your own?
Oh, yeah.
Can we start there if you don't mind?
Sure. The case with my children actually started in 2015. I mean, there was really not enough time for an investigation because caseworkers and police officers were coming out to remove my children, niece and nephews. And it was one of the things that it really did shock me at first, and it caught me off guard because I didn't know what my children were being removed for. I didn't even know what we were being investigated for. And I'm just now finding out this year that there was not enough allegations to remove, but it still occurred. And my children still not in my home.
Oh, they haven't been returned to you?
Only thing I've received is unsupervised visits, and it's for so many hours after
So
6 years.
is your case still open?
It is 6 years.
That's extremely unusual here in California. And, you know, here in California, generally speaking, not all the time, but if you have unsupervised visits, that's basically an admission by the social worker that you're not a risk to the child. And if you're not a risk to the child should be returned to you.
True. And then you would think the levels of supervision would go down at that point. But I see that's not always the scenario. Like I said, for maybe 8 or 9 hours at a time.
You see the kids 8 or 9 hours at a time unsupervised?
Mm-hmm. And that's only on the weekends when it happens.
Do you have a lawyer?
I represent myself. I'm pro se litigant.
Wow.
Miss Smith, can I ask do you mind angling your camera down a little bit?
Like this?
Perfect. That's much better. Thank you. So that's insane. 6 years that this has been going on. Now, do you happen to have training in this field? Did you go to school?
No. Everything God bless me, He taught me on my own. I learned without a school. I started picking up law books and I started reading. That's how I learned.
So would you use the title more of as an advocate?
Absolutely.
Helping others?
And I definitely do that in my community.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
What county are you in?
Taylor County.
And you've helped a lot of folks in that county who have these CPS cases?
Mm-hmm. Some that's been out of Taylor County too. Some in the East Texas area.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Are you considered in Central Texas or West Texas?
West Texas.
West Texas.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So my first question is going to be, is this your first experience, your own case, dealing with Child Protective Services, or did you have experience as a child yourself?
I never had experience as a child myself. This is something that occurred as an adult. As I got older, and it comes to a complete shocker because some of the things that's happened with Child Protective Services pertaining to my children. It's really scary to think and to actually believe that some of the things that's really occurred with Child Protective Services, it's a lot to go in your mind, if that's a better way of putting it. It's mentally, it makes you think, gives you questions. It makes you, if you allow it, it can make you crazy.
I would absolutely agree. I'm not sure if you know any history on myself or attorney Vince Davis, but the reason I got involved in everything that I do is because I also had a case with CPS as they took my children a few years ago. I'm not sure what's going on with the camera, but now I can't really see you again.
Look down some, baby. There you go.
There we go. You were off centered. Perfect, right there. So let's start with, if you don't mind, would you like to share a bit about your case and what happened? And
Sure.
Why it's
When
ongoing?
Sure, it is, but in 2015 is when my case began. And some of the things that happened then, I was completely unaware of, not aware of my constitutional rights in and out of the courtroom, not aware of what Child Protective Services can do and what they can't do. I was eager to sign this because I thought it would make the case go easier. I was doing this service, completing that service, which I completed service 7 times. The last time I paid for everything on my own. But once I really started reading, it really started discovering what was really occurring. Then I started backing off. I stopped getting court-appointed attorneys and all that. So I started putting my faith in God and representing myself. I got a whole lot further representing myself than I would with an attorney. And during the duration of the case, my children, they've been moved all over Texas, everywhere. Been in some of the most abusive homes in the foster care system here in Texas. Some of the things that's happened to my children. I brought all this before the judge, and it seemed like at the time nothing sufficed. But it didn't start occurring until last year, whenever I started seeing major doors that were opening and things that were moving.
Wow. So tell me how you have helped other families in their cases. And do you feel by helping other families that it has affected you in your case?
I can't necessarily say helping me in my case, but I look at it like this. What I've went through, I don't want to see another family member go through what I've went through with my family. So that if I can be in any of assistance to anyone, I'm going to do that because I know from experience how the system is. So if I can help another family, that's gratitude enough for me. And then what I have shown a lot of families is one thing you have to stop doing. One thing, use your Fifth Amendment, remain silent. Don't give a whole bunch of information that can be used against you. It's like a form of self-incrimination. Stop signing this information and that information because it helps them almost build a case against you. A lot of people started discovering what I was saying, and now they don't sign documentation just because. That was one of the major approaches that I went. Then up under the 14th Amendment, right to due process. That's another one that's helped a lot of families.
You know, Ms. Smith, I tell clients here in California all the time, don't talk to social workers. And, you know, I get flack about that. They get flack about it because a lot of people think that you have an obligation to talk to the social worker. Now, I don't know about other states, but I know here in California, you don't have an obligation.
In Texas,
I think people think, oh, if you talk to the social worker, that's a nice thing. And it probably is. But a lot of times you talk to the social worker and number one, you get misquoted, either intentionally or unintentionally. And then sometimes your story or your words are taken out of context, right? And I've had many people tell me, oh, I talked to the social worker and she lied. I said ABC and she wrote in the report XYZ. So I generally tell people, hey, don't talk to a social worker unless an attorney is present, either in person or on the phone. But I get a lot of calls. Oh, I talked to the social worker. I thought I had to. Oh, I talked to the social worker. I'm sorry, I admitted everything. Oh, I talked to the social worker and she took everything out of context. I hear that story so many times. And so I tell them, don't talk to the social worker. Now, Ms. Smith, out of all of the people that I tell that, what percentage do you think follow that advice?
Honestly, out of a scale of 100%, I'm probably going to say about 20 to 30 that probably do.
That's very good. And a lot of the people who don't follow that advice are my clients who hired me. I've told them, don't talk to the social worker unless I'm present. And guess what? They go ahead and talk to the social worker. Social workers are trained to gather information. They go to training like once a month. And they're taught things that you and I don't know about.
Right.
So they can get you talking and they will, write down what they believe they heard. And then that may not be accurate.
Right.
You know, everybody in these cases, I tell this to people all the time, everybody in these cases has their own agenda. And that includes the social worker.
Mm-hmm.
And guess what? Her agenda or his agenda ain't the same as your agenda, right? So I agree with you 100% on that. Don't talk to social workers. You know, and a lot of people tell me, well, will the judge be mad at me? You know, and I tell them this, probably. But if you talk to the social worker on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being worse, it's a 10.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
But if you don't talk to the social worker, it's only a 5. So what do you want? You want a 5 or a 10?
I'd rather have.
You know, I once was in the chambers of a judge with other attorneys discussing a case. And one of the social worker's attorneys says to the judge, you know, Your Honor, Mr. Davis won't let us interview his client. And I got about a 35, 40-second tongue lashing from the judge. And I looked around and I said, well, we're in chambers, we're not on the record. So I said, you know, politely, you know what, Your Honor? I was hired to defend my client.
Mm-hmm.
All right? And, you know, I've been doing it a couple years. I don't want my client stepping in, you know, his or her own SHIT.
Right.
Okay? So, you know, let me do the defense work. You know, you do the judge work.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, hopefully the system works.
Right.
You know, a lot of people think these CPS cases are non-adversary. They're non-adversary. They're supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
They're the most contentious adversary cases I've been involved in as a lawyer. I'll be a lawyer 35 years this December. These social workers want to win. These social workers want to take your kids away if they think that's what's right. And they'll do anything. They'll do anything to make that happen.
Right. Right.
You know, several years ago, I was doing a trial, doing a case for a woman. And in the report, which caused her children to be, or caused in part for her children to be taken away, the report said that the social worker spoke to the children's therapist, and the therapist said, blah, 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 basically to the effect that the kid should be returned to the mother.
Mm-hmm.
Now, during the entire case up to trial, my client kept telling me, Mr. Davis, the social worker never talked to the therapist. And I'm thinking, well, that's kind of hard to believe. I mean, is a social worker just going to write something that's just blatantly a lie?
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's easily to prove?
Mm-hmm.
So I subpoenaed the therapist to court, and I read to her what the report said. I said, is that true, ma'am? She says, no, it's not true. I said, you never said the kid should be taken away? She goes, no. And then somebody says, well, didn't you say something like that? She goes, no, I've never met or talked to the social worker in my life.
Mm-hmm.
Never met or talked to the social worker. Well, how did that make that in the report? Right? People think, first of all, let me say this. All social workers aren't bad. I'm not here to tell you that. I've worked with great social workers, very good social workers. The problem is, you know, it's just like police. You know, you got some bad apples. You know, George Floyd, he's killed right there on TV.
Right.
I mean, he's being filmed and he kills this man. Well, it's the same with social workers. There's bad social workers. And it gives all social workers, you know, a bad name.
Right.
Right?
It does.
I tell my attorneys that work with me, there's a civil rights case probably in almost every case. You know, there's that little bit that the social worker kind of twists so you don't get your kids or your kids are taken away from you. right?
Mhm.
And kept away from you.
Mhm.
You know, I deal with so many people. In my own mind, in my own gut, I can tell if kids are at risk being with their parents.
Mhm.
Because all the people that I represent, they're not all angels. Let's face it.
I
There is
agree.
child abuse. There's child abuse in the world.
It is.
You know, I'm not hearing them say it never happens. But in a lot of these cases, I talk to people, I meet with people, and they're sane, they're lucid, they're not drug addicts, right? But they don't have their kids. And you know, I used to be an accountant many years ago, and there was a joke. And the joke was, what's 2 plus 2?
4.
Ms. Smith, what's 2 plus 2?
4.
No, it's whatever you can pay it to be.
Mhm.
All right. You know, money and economics has such an influence on our society. Some people think it's good, some people think it's bad. I don't make a judgment either way. But these cases, you know, they're about money.
They are.
And a lot of people don't want to acknowledge that. You know how the county makes money? When they take your kid, they go to the federal government and say, hey, we need money because we've got to put this kid in foster care. We need
Right.
money to give the mother services, to give the father services, to give the kids services. All right? All that's money.
Right.
You know, a few years ago, I looked up, I researched some federal information. And at that time, the budget for CPS nationwide through the Department of Health and Human Services was 69, almost $70 billion. That's B. If you started counting right now, you couldn't count to 1 billion before you died. That's how big a billion is. And this budget is almost 70 billion. And I'm sure it's grown since that time. You know, so people at the top in CPS are telling the workers, go out and do God's work and protect children. And in a lot of cases, they take that to an extreme.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, those above at the top, no, we're talking about money. We're talking about big multi-million-dollar budgets for these counties.
Big old house.
Right.
The kids
Vince,
not
can
in
I
the
ask
car.
you, at what level do you think they start understanding their job and position of what they're actually doing?
You know, I don't know. You know, a lot of criminal defense lawyers say, you know, hey, I don't associate with district attorneys or police officers. You know, I'm a criminal defense attorney. Well, the same is true. I don't hang with social workers. But I think it's known. And I think it's just something that's eventually accepted. You know, I've talked to a lot of former social workers who told me about the culture that sometimes exists in these offices. You know, and the culture is do whatever is necessary to win, to protect children. So if it means lie, cheat, and steal, well, you know, that's what you got to do. You got to do it. A lot of social workers have left. They say, hey, I can't do it, right? I did a case, this has been several years ago, a civil rights case. And although her attorney describes it differently, on a videotape deposition, a social worker admitted to lying and being untruthful in signing her declarations, right? She admitted it. But when I got her, or tried to get her to admit that those above her knew it and went along with it, or instructed her to do it, she denied everything. Okay. The case settled, went to mediation. A retired federal judge, you know, talked my client into accepting a very large settlement. But guess what happened to that social worker? You would think she would have gotten fired, right? She got promoted.
Wow.
She got promoted. And I think, it's just my thinking, that it was because she protected those above her. She took the sword, you know, all alone. Guess what? Nothing happened to her. Nobody prosecuted. My client was so upset that she filed a complaint with the Department of Justice. You know, here's a lady that's lied under oath to a court. If I lied, or Ms. Smith, if you lied, you'd be under the jail.
We held in contempt of court because it's prohibited by state and federal law.
Well, nothing happened to her. She got a promotion. And today she works in that same office.
Wow.
Today, every once in a while, I ask people, "Oh, is so-and-so still at the, so-and-so office?" Oh yeah, she's a supervisor. She's a supervisor.
That's crazy.
There is a guy he's in San Diego. He's one of the gurus of suing social workers. He's, a really good attorney, hard worker, hardest working man that I know. And by the way, his name is Sean McMillan, right? And he once did a deposition of the chief financial officer, so to speak, of CPS, and I think it was in Orange County, maybe not, maybe it was another county. But anyway, he posted the deposition on Facebook. And the county kept complaining and taking it down, and he kept putting it back up. If you ever see that video, if you ever find it anywhere on the internet, and you listen to it carefully, and you watch the social worker give testimony, you will realize this is about money. This is America. Everything has to do about money. It's a money-making system. It's a huge, huge business, cottage industry.
It is. It is.
And the sad part, and it doesn't always happen, but it happens a lot because I hear about it. People call me. They took my kids away, they put them into foster care, and they got sexually abused. They got emotionally abused. They got the crap beat out of them. Foster care isn't what we think, or what we think that it is. Some wild, crazy stuff happens in foster care.
Absolutely.
Now, are there good foster parents? Of course there are. Right? But, it's like there's enough to give foster parents sometimes a bad name. When I first started working in this area, I used to represent foster parents in licensing cases. It's where a foster parent did something wrong, and now the state is going after them to take their license away. The problem with that is that those cases are heard in an administrative court, not in the CPS juvenile court, and they're confidential. So I once represented a woman who caused the death of a foster child. Caused the death of a foster child. Now, when you think about it, what could those parents have done to take the kid out of their care, place it in a foster home where the kid dies?
Leaves many questions.
Right. And I'm one of those guys, well, if it happened once, that's just unacceptable.
Right.
Right. Some people play the numbers game, it only happens a few times. Although that may be true, what if it was your child who got abused? Right? So it's a system that needs reform.
It definitely does.
I don't have answers. I see the problems, but people are very complex. Very complex. When you mix that with children and abuse, it's something that you can't do.
True.
Not too long ago, my office represented, and this is typical, we represented a parent whose children were taken away. because she and the dad got in a fight one night 2 weeks before.
Mm-hmm.
Neither of them have ever been arrested. Neither of them are involved in drugs. But the social workers took the kids.
Was it an emergency or?
Well, you're asking those legal questions, Ms. Smith. How many times do you disagree with a judge about the legal answers in any particular case?
I mean, you
Now,
don't really see it, but
as an advocate, I know you've maybe I will guess that you've met people that it would be like, yeah, your kids probably should be taken away from you. But I bet you met a lot of people, hey, your kids should never have been taken away.
I have.
Right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
So let me ask you this.
Okay.
If I'm in your county, all right, or anywhere in Texas, and I need help, how do I get in touch with you? Do you have a website, a phone number, an email, a Facebook page? Like how do I get in touch with you? Because look, the purpose of this show is to expose and tell people out there in the world about people like you so that they can go someplace to find help.
Right.
I don't know if you know lawyers that you can refer people to. I don't know if you could just talk to people and fill them in. Most people, when they call, they don't have a clue. They have no idea. They have no idea what they've gotten themselves into.
Vince, maybe both of you or one of you can explain the place or position of an advocate and how they can help in a case.
Ms. Smith, you do that.
Okay. From my point of view, with helping other, hold on, do other? Okay. From my point of view and from my experience with families that come, one of their main things, and I know that they want the answers right then and there. Okay, what do I do? What do I say when I go to court? How do I get my children back? But sometimes it's not always that easy. You have to look for ways and you have to have approaches for this. Okay, the caseworker says this, the caseworker, well, how do you dispute it? And sometimes it's not easily disputed. Sometimes you really do have to go to court. Sometimes you really have to show in front of the judge. You have to appeal in front of the judge, Your Honor, such and such and such and such. And then you have a court-appointed attorneys here that are appointed by the courts, but the representation that you need is never given. So what are the parents to do when it seems like their back is against the wall? What are they supposed to do when it seems like they're doing everything that they absolutely can? And with Texas being the state that it is, it's not easy to win a family appeal here if you just appeal the decision, because there's 3 elements that you have to satisfy, and that's fraud, coercion, coercion and duress, excuse me. So what are the family to do? Some of the questions that they ask me, well, what do you think I should do at this point? Okay, if they want you to take this type of test, you go pay for your own test. Go pay for your own drug test. If you've got Medicaid, go to the hospital and pay for your drug test. If they want a psychological evaluation to show that you have nothing to hide, go pay for your own. And that's your evidence that you use. I've had to file my own exhibits before in court that showed the same thing. No, there's no pattern here. Sometimes you have to get a second opinion. That's a huge start. Whenever you come up for home visits, show that you're able to maintain for your child, because the state pays fosters to take care of your children, and you can raise your children the way you please for free. Those are starts right there. That's some of the things that I advocate to a lot of families here in Taylor County about that same subject.
So what place do you have in court and during the case? Do you go to court with them? Are you allowed in the courtroom? Are you allowed to have a voice?
Sometimes if I speak for for testimonial purposes, because some of them I know, some of them I just step in and I do disclose that, hey, I'm not a lawyer. Everything I share with this person is meant for the educational purposes. And right now with the pandemic everything is through Zoom. And if it's okay and if it's approved by the parents or with their attorney, then I'll be able to sit in, because sometimes we're not always allowed to. Or before they go in, I'll say a prayer. Hey, this is what I want you to go over with your attorney. Some that are representing themselves. We'll go over it like 2 days in advance, sometimes up to a week in advance. Hey, these are the subjects that you need to approach right here. You have to satisfy those elements under law. That's what they're looking for. You have to prove that you're not what's on black and white.
Well, Ms. Smith, how do I get in touch with you if I'm in Taylor County?
Well, I have my own little email address because I have 3 of them. I have an email address under smithlachelle545@gmail.com.
Oh, no, you got to slow that down. You got to slow that down.
I'm
Say it
sorry.
again.
It's Smith Lachelle, SMITHLASHELLE 545@gmail.com. That's how I do a lot of things via email.
How about, do you have a Facebook page?
I do.
What's the name of it?
It's up under my name, Lachelle Smith, but you just look up under Lachelle Smith and my nickname, Tashina Brown, it shows up. And that's how you can get a hold of me. Some people private message me for the same thing. Some of them, what's the penal code for this, or what's the penal code for this? Texas Family Code 161. And I'm able to share that information because I've had 6 years experience in this thing. So I know a thing or two of what I'm saying.
Do you have a telephone number you can give us?
Sure. It's 325-305-3506.
Repeat that one time for me. 325.
325-305-3506.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
What's the number one thing a parent should do if they have a catch case, a CPS case in Taylor County?
One thing that's always important to do, always consult some type of legal advice. Always consult an attorney before you go over here, before you go to the office and this, because a lot of people, it's scary whenever you receive a phone call or an intake about CPS caseworkers because you hear all the horror stories of what goes on. Always try to contact legal representation. Some of them here, well, yeah, you'll get a free consultation, but to retain the family attorney, it's going to cost you about $7,000 to $10,000 here to retain one. And they know that a lot of people can't afford those services. And I feel that it's a lot of undereducated parents that are targeted because they're not aware of what's going on in the system and they don't have the money to afford legal representation. So some parents would have to get to the point to where I didn't have money for them, and I got tired of going through court-appointed attorneys that wasn't representing me or my interest to my children. So I started, God bless me, I started representing myself.
Did you have to make a special request to the judge to start representing yourself?
I did.
And what did the judge say?
She granted my motion for it. She granted me the stance finally to represent myself. She kept asking, are you sure you want? Yes, ma'am, I am. I would like to proceed pro se litigant.
How long have you been pro se?
Since 2019.
Do you have like a consulting court-appointed attorney? Someone that...
At one point I did. A standby counsel, I did.
And do you have that now?
I can call her at any time, yeah. Because she still gives me inside knowledge of this, or she'll tell me this, hey, you're doing great right here, but this is something I thought that you should know. Yeah.
So I ask you, what's the one thing they should do, and that's consult an attorney. What's the one thing they shouldn't do?
Never, ever, 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 no matter what's on black and white. I know by law, CPS has to investigate, but do not say a word. Keep your mouth shut, because what you say will be used against you in a court of law. No matter if they say, oh, we're just out to help your family. No, that's a trick that they use. No, we're actually out. They should say we're out to make a case against you, basically.
Right. Do you guys have meetings where, before they file, they invite you into the office, they question you, but with 2 or 3 people, and then they file the case, the next couple of days. And then everything that you said in that meeting, it's in their report being used against you to keep your kids away from you.
Absolutely.
You guys have that down in Texas?
We do. Oh, we do. But it's worse here. Instead of it being 2 or 3 people, it would be a room full of people that you know nothing about. And with me representing myself, I just feel that anytime you want a meeting, I don't think that it's appropriate at this point because of what's happened in the past. then it's like they go in with very little information and then they'll bounce back to old cases, but those questions have already been asked and answered. What are you doing? What are you doing re-examining for the same questions that you've already asked me?
Do you have any type of literature or anything that you pass out to folks down there in Taylor?
Taylor County? Yes, sir, I do on my email, on my laptop, excuse me, yes.
Okay.
Do you charge for your services?
Oh, no. Oh, no.
Do you think, you know, I think we'd like to get a copy of what you post out, and then we'll post it on our Facebook page, and, you know, people can comment on it.
Okay.
And, you know, maybe you might be able to help someone, you know. But I like that idea, or that comment that you made. And it's comments that you tell people the same thing I tell them. Talk to a lawyer, and don't talk to the social worker. Wow. That's it in a nutshell. A lot of people, you know, I went off on a tangent earlier, but, you know, a lot of people talk to social workers because they think they can outsmart or outtalk the social worker. They really do. And, you know, they think that social workers are not bright, not smart, don't know what they're doing. And that's not the case at all. They know exactly what they're doing. So it's interesting that you and I give out the same advice. And you just learned that through, you know, going through the case, huh? For 6 years.
And reading Texas law books, yes. Yes, sir.
Have you ever thought about becoming a lawyer?
I have.
You should think about that, because you can help a lot of people.
Yes, sir.
A lot of people need your help.
Thank you.
Ms. Smith, may I ask, where are your children?
They are here in Abilene, but it's still, even 5 blocks, still too far to be away from me, you know. But I'll get them again this weekend.
Do you get them for overnight visits?
Well, no, 8 and 9 hours. So after school, and then they'll be picked up like 11:30 during the weekends, because they have school during the weekdays.
You know what I would suggest is you talk to that attorney, that coaching attorney, backup attorney you have, and find out if you can file something to get 1 or 2 or all of the children back. Because if you're having unmonitored visits, by definition, that means you're not a risk to the children. Now, I don't know anything about Texas law. That's why I'm saying, you know, find out from that attorney if you can file something.
Right, because I know it's so many visits that you have unsupervised before they start moving, and it gets longer, and then you're looking at them in the home.
Right. It seems like 6 years is an awful long time.
That's what I'm saying too. I mean, you would think that after 6 years, I know how many extensions can the state file. I know here in the state of Texas, for family cases, sometimes it's granted where they can get a 6-month extension, but 6 years later, that would mean that this case is still, it would run out of statute of limitations for the case. And I'm not understanding that at all. But then I also look too, in our branch, I don't know if it's the same in all states, they go under civil law, and under civil law, it still spells out money. It's revenue. It's cases $200 or more. And
you know, this happened years ago. I represented a mother who lost her children. There were a couple real issues that she was dealing with. And the 6-month hearing came up for her to talk about getting the kids back. And the social worker wrote in the report, the kids should go back and could go back except for one thing. Mom lost her housing. When the kids were taken, she had subsidized housing through Section 8 in the city of Los Angeles. And when she lost her kids, she lost her housing. So she was basically homeless and surfing from couch to couch with friends. So I came up with an idea, because I thought about it. The 5 kids were in 4 different foster homes. And I estimated that they were paying these foster homes about $9,000, just an estimate.
Per month?
Yeah, per month. So the county was paying, and the gentleman who was the judge, he was pretty much a fiscal conservative. And he was like, well, we could pay, the mother could get a luxury apartment for $2,000 and we'd save the taxpayers, $6,000. And I made a motion, and it had to be supported by law from other states because this issue had come up in other states. I couldn't find anything in California, but I did read California had, and I don't know if they still have this, a statute that says when you give reunification services, it could and can include housing.
Is that way in Texas?
Right, can include housing. So I made this motion. It was continued several times. And the social worker, he wasn't the top social worker, he was like number 2 in the entire county, came and talked to the judge and me and the other attorney on the case. And you know what they did? They got this mother an apartment. They got her all appliances. A lot of it was donated. They got her all beds, for the kids, but stove, refrigerator, stuff like that. I mean, she was set up, really nice. And they did that for her because they couldn't justify spending $8,000 or $9,000 to keep the kids away from her in foster care.
Right. See, I know in the state of Texas, they have those services here, but those services that they should give to blood families, they hold it back and it goes to foster families or adoptive families, which we consider strangers. I mean, if you think about it here, because they have it in categories for children here, the majority of the foster parents, they go for either specialized or intense children, meaning if you stick a child on a medication, that increases the pay for it. And that's in a month, and they get paid so much per day. Or like one of my children, my 8-year-old son, they started giving my son medication when he was 2 years old, and every type of medication that you can think of under the sun, everything. I mean, medications that he didn't even need, but I also started noticing the more medication that they was giving him, the more revenue the foster family was pulling. And however much a foster parent gets paid a day, I know that some people don't know it, but foster parents gets paid a percentage. Say, for instance, they make $60 a day. Well, the placement agency is going to make 2 times that amount in a day. You have to follow the money trail, starting from the caseworker, and it can even go up to judges. You have to really follow the money trail because it's all about money in the system. That's what they can never ever make. Can't make any money without the children. That's why you see so many removals that are unwarranted, which are really a violation under the 4th Amendment. But a lot of parents, they don't know that. And that's some more information that I like giving to the family so they'll know exactly what's going on. Yes, abduction. Yeah, you know that it is. But the thing about it is, how do you prove it? How do you satisfy those elements by the law?
Right.
That's the part.
That's the hard part. That's the hard part.
When you guys are ready, I have some comments, questions and comments from people that are watching right now.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Again, some of these are comments, so if you want to just chime in and say something about it, you're welcome to, and then I'll let you know when there's a question. So, social worker in my case violated my due process and she got promoted. You guys were talking about the negative things that happen with social workers. Mr. Vincent Davis, what am I legally allowed to obtain from Children's Services regarding my file? Everything has to do with me and my children because they gave me a paper, but I have to request specific things that I want. What am I allowed to get? I don't know if that actually makes sense.
Well, in California, you're entitled to a copy of your file. So if the case is open, I've heard people, when their case is closed or if they lost their child through adoption, that they can't get their file. But I think that you're entitled to, even then, to get everything up to, the adoption. Right.
Same here in the state of Texas.
But you're entitled to all your documents to your file. And I tell people, take your ID, go down to the courthouse, and order a copy of your file.
Right.
Now they may, tell you come back in a couple days or a week.
Mhm.
Sometimes your file is over in archives,
Right.
but you're entitled to your file.
You are.
A lot of people say you have to file something called an 827 petition in order to get a copy of your file. So you can do that as well. I happen to disagree with that because there's some statutes here in that area of the Welfare and Institutions Code, which leads me to believe that you can just have your file even without an 827 petition. I mean, it's your case, right?
Right. Right.
Anybody should have a copy of it. You should if you're the parent.
Right. If it's
or if you're the child.
Right. You think.
I did an interview today where the mother took her child to the emergency room. The doctor didn't say anything. They didn't do any labs or anything with the child. The child had a high fever. The mom decided that she was going to take the child elsewhere and get another opinion because she didn't agree with what they were doing. When it was the father's visit, which was like 2 days later, he brought the child back to the same ER because the child still had a fever. And they called CPS on the parents. They falsely diagnosed the child with something that was proven the child did not have it. He ended up having like a common cold, but because the parents wanted to take the child from that ER to another one against medical advice, they had called CPS and CPS got involved. They admitted the child for 2 weeks. This was a baby, a 1-year-old. So that baby sat in the, I'm not sure if you've ever taken your child to the hospital when they're that young, but it's like a jail for kids. It's a crib that is literally a jail. It's horrible. And they didn't allow the parents to see the child. Again, 2 weeks. Ran all these tests. Nothing ended up being wrong with the child. The child then gets put into foster care, and the mom and dad are still fighting to get their child back, and nothing ends up even being wrong with the kid. And I have heard this where falsely diagnosed, or maybe a rash looks like abuse, but it's something more serious. What do you do in that case? And the parents still have their rights, but yet they're not allowed to have the medical records. They're not allowed to go to the doctor visits. And this is in California, by the way, Vince.
That sounds completely contrary to everything that I believe is the law here in California.
I think that this person has a case, a good case. From what I've heard, I haven't seen it,
right.
Obviously.
And we don't know all the facts, right? And, a lot of times, people tell me a story, and then when I actually get into it, they left something out, right, of the story. And sometimes that the part they left out was extremely important.
Yeah. So
I tell people, based on what you've told me, and if it's true, blah, 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 blah. But, a lot of times people tell you only the good stuff and not the bad stuff, right? In every story, there are weaknesses, there are, breaks in the chain, chinks in the chain, that prove to be a problem that you have to deal with, right? I don't think I've ever come across a case that was 100% slam dunk. Right. As a matter of fact, in that case that I told you about earlier, I thought that was a slam dunk. And then about 60-70% of the way through, I get evidence about my client that I never would have dreamed of. Never would have dreamed of, that was in her background. She never mentioned that to me. So there's always chinks in the chains.
Somebody asked how they can stop legal guardianship.
Mm,
You know,
that's some-
go ahead, Ms. Smith.
that'd be something that would have to be within the courts.
I think she's right. You know, maybe, legal guardianship is sometimes better than adoption,
Mhm.
because adoption, you probably can't get the child back. But if you have a guardianship, in the future, you can go back, at least in California, you can go back and, try to get the child back in your custody. Maybe every 2 or 3 months, a person comes to me and says, hey, my mother has legal guardianship. I got my stuff together, my act together, and I'm ready to get my child back. I want to file something. I'm involved in a case right now where we represent the legal guardians, and the parents are filing to get the child back. So it happens. Any other questions on
Yes, I am looking right now. Ms. Smith, this is a
Yes.
statement, and I'm curious about your opinion. I know you've kind of touched on it, especially being that you were representing yourself.
Mhm.
Court-appointed attorneys do not work for the families.
They look, and I'm just going to be honest when I say this, and I'm here in Taylor County, you see them, they don't. You see them working the opposite. If you want some of these attorneys to ask questions or approach a subject in court, 9 times out of 10, they're not going to. So that's why I started representing myself because of that same reason. Because I know that if it's something that I want said, it's going to be said. And even if an attorney doesn't object for you, that's almost like it goes against state evidence. So yeah, it's a lot of practice to become a pro se litigant, but it's also better in the long run too. So that way you fight your fight the way you want to. Because an attorney is just, they speak what we want to in the courtrooms legally. Some attorneys are good, but here in Taylor County, I haven't seen a bunch of them here.
Okay. Let's see. What would you recommend to somebody who can't afford
An attorney?
any assistance? Yeah.
I mean, what I did, like I stated before, I couldn't afford those legal costs. They're seven, tens of thousands of dollars. So that's when I really started getting in depth. I started reading Texas law. God bless me, I started educating myself. And for situations like that, I mean, I like to give that information out for those who don't, and those who does consider fighting their own fight pro se litigant. I mean, you'll be surprised how many people that has represented themselves pro se litigant but didn't say a thing in court. So basically, you help them beat you in court, and everything they said against you has just been filed against you. If you don't object to it, it becomes state property.
Somebody asked, what steps do you take to get a case dismissed?
It's different ways to get a case dismissed. You can file motion to dismiss a case. You file that directly with the courts. I mean, before you file, you need to fill out the paperwork because you're indigent to waive filing fees, because if not, you are required to file. You are required to pay, those filing fees. They may grant it, they may not, but 9 times out of 10, if they know that you're indigent, they'll grant it. Then you start filing that motion for a motion to dismiss. You can also, go ahead. You can also say, for instance, if Child Protective Services, if you're representing yourself like me, if they file something against you, sometimes I know in the state of Texas, you can file a motion to oppress against the evidence that they have against you. The judge is either A, going to grant it, or the judge is not going to grant it.
Now, I feel I know the answer to this question, but I'll have you guys answer. Can they remove your children without any type of paperwork?
Oh no, here in the state of Texas, they say that if they move your child without evidence, okay, usually you're supposed to you can get an emergency here in Texas before an emergency or after an emergency, but you don't see that occur here as much. They'll go to court, well, Your Honor, this is why we felt that we had to move the child because the child was in an emergency situation. And one thing, well, do you mind explaining what the emergency was? Then you hear, well, raw emotions. Raw emotion is not a way to violate a family's constitutional rights. You know what I mean? Well, I felt, well, they had an open case. None of these accusations that you're coming with matches with what you removed the child for. I mean, caseworkers, and you don't see a lot of them, they have to prove prima facie, meaning on the face of it. They have to prove, they have to satisfy that element, and a lot of them don't. And then you see some judges that goes with their motion anyways, and I'm like, how is this even standing? How is this even legal? But it does happen a lot. I mean, you have to really, 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 in an emergency, and 9 times out of 10, if police come, you better believe there better be some type of arrests that are made. If police are coming, because they're really not supposed to be involved in civil matters, but you see them that they are.
Ms. Smith, if I have a case in your jurisdiction and I'm a parent, are there any attorneys that you recommend, private attorneys or court-appointed attorneys?
Here in Taylor County, there would probably only be maybe one, maybe two attorneys that I would really, really, really recommend. And if she wanted the money for it, she'd be worth every penny. And that would probably be Erica Elizabeth Hall. I think she's one of the best. She's for families. She's for what's right. She's for the law. And she's really good at what she does.
Have you ever talked to her or met with her?
Oh, yeah. She's represented me once.
Okay, well, it's good to hear there's at least one or two people that you recommend down in Taylor.
Do you assist families who have closed cases? This is a two-part question. Closed cases, maybe they're trying to appeal their case. And then what about a husband and a wife? Are you only able to assist one, the husband or the wife, or are you able to assist both?
Usually it's one or the other, because some of the parents that I talk to, they're either divorced from their spouse or they're living in separate households. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And one of them, well, I'm trying to go up under this. Trying to go up under that. How do I do this? Because I really want my children. And some of the dads that do come in, they have a genuine concern for their children, you know? And I don't discriminate on the fact that one's man, one's woman. I look at it all the same. If you need help, that's what I'm going to do. That's what I'm here to help you with. Now, if you were to appeal a decision here in the state of Texas, you have 30 days for the notice of appeal. But just because you file an appeal, sometimes it can be granted, sometimes it's rejected. It's normal. It happens. But if you were to appeal, say, for instance, a child protective service case here in the state of Texas, it's normally one of the states where you don't have your rights reinstated. You have to satisfy 3 elements for your rights to be reinstated again, and that's fraud, coercion, and duress. Yeah. Texas is a very tricky state on reinstating parental rights.
I have interviewed quite a few families from Texas, and their cases are just very sad, and a lot of accusations to the fathers of sexual abuse, not made by the children. And then the mothers or the wives are told that, you know, they want their children, they have to leave their spouse. But if the spouse, you know, in their eyes is innocent, mm-hmm. and there was no domestic violence and there wasn't anything like that, what do they do?
For that situation, say for instance, are you saying it, in other words, is it the caseworker that's making the accusations against the other parent?
Or a family member that has called in and stated that there was sexual abuse, but the children are denying it?
Right, okay. See, in my opinion, that would be something, it would go beyond a family court at that moment, because that would be like an individual, you would have to sue for, first of all, if it's in black and white, you know that it's libelous and it's slander. But to prove slander too in the courts is really hard. It's more than just going to court and saying, well, hey, my in-laws, she lied on me. I mean, you've got to know this is how it ruined your reputation. I can't get my children. I can't get a good job. I can't get adequate housing that I need. Proving and satisfying those elements under slander. If it's wrote in black and white, it's libelous. It's libel. You'd have to prove those points. Now, on the other hand, if it was a caseworker that's just maliciously making these lies up against you, they're doing everything in their power to keep your child away from you. That would be more someone acting under the color of law clause. Then you've got a claim right there too. It doesn't necessarily say under the color of law clause CPS. It can mean anyone acting under the color of law. That can go for a lawyer. That can even go for judges. That can be a doctor, anyone. That's my approach for that part. I mean, that would be something where you'd have to really go, if it's a family member, you'd have to sue for probably slander or libel. But a caseworker, I mean, the same thing. But then with a caseworker or someone of that sort, you're probably looking at more of a color of law clause, 1983 lawsuit, which is civil. But yeah, that would be my honest synopsis.
What would be the most difficult case that you've assisted on?
One case that I was helping in, like I said, it did look heinous. And I'm not going to dismiss any names when I say this, but it was one family member in particular. And it was due to drugs. I'm just going to put it that way. I mean, children tested positive for it. They tested positive for it. They're thankful to God that they didn't have criminal charges behind it, because you would think with something like that it would. I mean, and it took them at least 3 years. You know what I mean? Drug test after drug test, service after service, you name it, everything that they were doing. But it finally took a break whenever I started working with them myself. When I started giving them information that can help them. I mean, everything that they're going over now, they was even to the point, caseworkers even having their drug test fabricated. So I told them, okay, this is what you're going to have to do. The same day you go and take a test for them, minutes after, go take your own test, because that'll dispute anything that they're saying. And when they started doing it, okay, the judge started seeing, no, there's not a repeated pattern here. There's not history that's being repeated here. And they started trusting the family enough. They have their children now.
Wow. Mm-hmm. Well, I would be very interested in interviewing you as far as getting your story, if you'd like to do that.
Sure, absolutely.
I want to thank you for coming on and joining me and Vince. Vince, do you have anything that you would like to add?
No, just thank you, Ms. Smith. I appreciate you.
You're welcome.
And for everybody that's watching, this will be a regular where we interview experts and other attorneys on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Make sure to go follow our new Facebook page and group that will be advertised on the horror stories. And then don't forget, this weekend on the radio on KABC 790 KABC AM, we will be Sunday from 4 to 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and we have a guest expert, Dean Tong, that will be joining us. So if you guys have any questions, you can reach out to us on our page, and the phone number is 1-800-222-5222 for the radio this weekend. And we will see you guys then. So, okay, guys, I hope you have an amazing evening. And Vince, we'll talk to you Sunday on the radio.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.